In this video on architectural detailing, we will progress on the first two videos and add further detail and information to the detail already commenced. Just to recap on where we have reached at this stage, we have the main elements of the detail drawn in with the ground floor level here and the inside finished level here and the wall showing with the foundation at the bottom. And there are still some elements to add to the detail. So first of all, we could look at the inside face of the cavity wall, and in there we need some plaster. I'm going to use the mortar layer, and on that layer we can put some things relating to the mortar and plaster and the render. So that's offset by 15 millimeters, and let's trim off that line at this point. So that new line now represents the plaster on the inside of the wall. And something else that we need in here is perimeter insulation. So that should be 25 millimeters. So we'll offset by 25, and we'll just trim the screed at this point, and that line should be on the insulation layer, and we'll make that layer current, and we'll just fill in where that insulation would be. So in addition to the 125 floor insulation here, there needs to be perimeter insulation as well. And obviously then on top of the floor there may be some type of floor finish. So I suppose we could just show something there indicative at this stage. Maybe it's a timber finish or something like that. Obviously, depending on what you choose, you can show different things there. So again, we'll just maybe move that onto the timber layer, so that it indicates what that might be made of. Now down at this point, we should show something of a skirting board. And skirting boards do come in different sizes and shapes and so on. So let's draw something indicative, at least at this point anyway. So again, let's make it 18, and we'll maybe make it by 50. And rather than leave it as a straight edge there, we'll maybe give it a filleted edge, and we'll give the radius of 10 millimeters, see what that looks like. Okay, and again we'll pop that onto the timber layer and just move that down. On the outside then, we also need to add in the render. Sometimes with render you do get different types of render, different finishes obviously. In this case we'll just go for a standard type of render. So that's offset by 25 millimeters in this case, and we'll draw a line out from here, and we're not even on the right layer, so should have been on the mortar layer, but let's just match the properties from the other line there, and we'll use the fillet tool again, but we need to change the radius back to 0. Sometimes render maybe does have a slight bell end at the bottom, and you can get fittings that help keep a nice flush surface there, but at this stage we'll just leave it like that for now. Something else that we need to think about then is the insulation. So let's go to the insulation layer, and we'll start off with the perimeter insulation. One way of achieving insulation is by using a line. So we'll draw a line from the midpoint to the midpoint, and if we go to the line types and select other and then load, we can load what's called batting. Load that line type, click OK, and then we can apply the batting line type to that line. Now you will need to keep a close eye on the properties to work out just exactly what scale you want to give that. So the scale at the moment is 1. I would say maybe 1.2 might fit roughly inside that. Okay, so that might look okay, might not be to everybody's preference, but it is something that will work in a lot of circumstances. But let's apply it over here and see where there's maybe sometimes a problem. So again, we'll go and choose the line type and change the scale, with that being 125. Let's check. 6 is what I meant to type, actually, not 60. Okay, so that's not looking so good. It's a wee bit messy. What sometimes is preferable to do is to actually draw a circle. So we'll draw a circle and make it a radius of 30. And we'll move that from the quadrant point to the edge, and then we'll copy that down to the bottom as well, and move that over by 30. And then what we can do is copy another one, so copy over by 60, and we'll use a few lines here just to try and start to replicate what the insulation might actually look like. Quadrant again. So we can now trim some of these lines. Like so. A little bit time consuming, but once you have one set of lines, then it becomes a bit easier after that. Okay, and then what we can do is copy multiple times to see what the insulation looks like there. Maybe I've chosen a radius that's just a little bit too big for that size, but you see the principle there. Maybe if you were to use 20 or 25, might work a little bit better. But you can see that is a little bit neater and tidier. You don't end up with these jaggedy lines, and that's two options anyway to put in the insulation. And certainly from my point of view, I think either of those options are better than trying to use one of the hatching types for insulation. Now I filled in the cavity with insulation, and I've also reduced the radius of the circles on this side, or the arcs on this side here, just to make it look a little bit nicer. So we've done the insulation, the plaster and the render. Now let's note down here that we need to add in a weep hole, so it's probably best to go to the brickwork layer again and just add in something of a weep hole here. So they do come in different forms and sizes. Basically a weep hole will go between two bricks in one of the perpendicular joints just to let any water seep out. So this internal leaf or external leaf of the cavity will not be entirely waterproof. Water will get through. The mortar joints, for example, are porous, and when rain is heavy enough it will get through there. And even further up where there's render, when it's wet enough, water may well seep in through, and so we need to allow for that to run down the inside of that outside leaf, and then have a means of escape or a way for the water to drain out. So that's what a wee pull will allow. So let's draw a line over by 20 millimeters, and then draw a line down at an angle. So let's actually use ortho instead, and have a line maybe across this way in some point. Let's see, just offset maybe by 20 millimeters again on the front here. So let's have a line like that, and it might be useful just in some way to mark that. I'm not going to necessarily finish all the elements of the detail here, but if you were showing that properly, you might want to make those lines dashed so that it's indicating what's happening at that point. So that's for a wee pull, just to allow the water to seep out. Again, there may be other elements that you need to think about, like hardcore down here, or the blinding. So at this stage, I'm just going to add in, it's probably best to put that on the concrete layer, I suppose. There are different ways of showing the hardcore. At this stage, I'm just going to show a few lines to indicate what's happening. So let's choose nearest down here, and again up on that face and down there. Okay, so that's indicating something of hardcore down there at that point. Basically, there does need to be backfill once the excavation has all been completed and everything built. Then you do need to fill in the rest of the void with backfill material, or hardcore, or blinding, as it can be called. Basically, it's quite coarse stones, and this level here indicates fine blinding or sand can go in there before the concrete will be poured. The next thing to do then is some hatching. So a few examples of that. Now when you're doing hatching, the toolbar will modify itself once you choose the hatch tool. So we'll do the foundation first of all, and here's the modified section of the ribbon now, showing the patterns. So we'll go down and find the concrete pattern, and we'll put that inside the foundation. Okay, that scale is 1, so that's quite good for the foundation itself there, and we'll just leave it at that scale. What we do want to make sure is that some of the bits of concrete maybe are a slightly different scale. So that's one element that's done. Again, this element here is concrete, but that's not necessarily shown in as nicest form as we might want. So let's make that 0.8, see what it looks like. That didn't actually change the scale. Let's try again. Okay, that looks a wee bit better. And one more go with that hatching for the floor screed. And maybe we'll just change that to 0.5. Okay. For the bottom of the wall, at this level, it's going to be blocks laid on their side, or a different type of block, concrete block that you get down in there. So for the hatching on that, we'll just choose ANSI 31, and in terms of the scale, it's a wee bit dense, so we'll modify it. what we should probably do is put that on the blockwork layer as well. So let's make that 5, see what it looks like. Sometimes it is a little bit of trial and error to see what's going to work. Let's try it this way. Okay, that looks not too bad. Maybe a wee bit bigger. 7, possibly. Okay, so we'll stick with that scale then, and we know that that was 7. So let's do the other elements of blockwork. And you can choose an option or two to create separate hatches if you so desire. Although I don't think it's a big issue when you're only dealing with a small area of one detail here. But that's just something to bear in mind that you might want to use at some point. For the brickwork then, let's change over to the brickwork layer. And again, we'll use the scale of 7, so that's fine. But let's use ANSI 32. Actually, the scale maybe isn't quite as nice as I'd have liked. Now, the wee pole there is causing a little bit of difficulty. So let's reduce that scale to 5 maybe, see what that looks like. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Looks more accurate. And we also need to add in something here for the ground level. So that's on the brickwork layer. Let's just continue to use that layer. And in the meanwhile, we'll draw a temporary line just to show what is happening on the outside here. We'll delete this line in a moment. Again, let's use hatching. We need to find one that looks like earth. Sometimes people will use this herringbone pattern, but I prefer one of the other ones, this one, earth. So let's try that in the area. Okay, so the scale of that maybe is a little too dense. So let's change the scale to 5 and change the angle to 45. That looks not too bad, maybe a wee bit more, 10. That's too much, so somewhere in between. And we can delete the line. That leaves a few more things just to add in terms of the hatching then. So the render, the plaster, the sand and mortar joints and things like that. So let's use another hatch for that. It's the AR sand one. Hopefully that's a scale of 1. Okay, I think that's showing up okay. Yep. So let's go around and add that in. Aha, there is a little bit of an issue there. So that would fill in more than we want. So let's just leave it at that with the one area. And let's go and add in a line on the mortar layer just here to fill in that gap. We'll send that to the back, and that should allow us to then add that sand hatch into that area, and we can go round and fill in the various elements of the mortar joints with the hatch. Okay, I mean, to be honest, that maybe is a little bit on the small side, or not dense enough. So let's change the scale maybe to 0.5, see if that looks any better. Yeah, a little bit clearer just where the hatching is, and we'll fill in this part. Scale of 1 looks okay down in there. The last thing is timber, but Depending on which version of AutoCAD you have, sometimes it is actually better to draw some arcs. So let's add an arc or two on the timber layer. And we'll just do this one manually. It's a small area, so it's not going to be too bad. So we'll just copy that a number of times. Doesn't need to be terribly accurate because the pattern will not be always the same. So let's trim that off now. One remaining line there to trim. Oh, got rid of the skirting board, didn't mean to do that. Takes you to be careful what you're doing. And for the skirting board, we'll make the pattern go a different way. So let's use something that looks more like that. And we'll just copy that a number of times along the skirting board and see what it looks like. Okay, not too bad. So that's the majority of that done. And the only thing then remaining is annotations. To add in annotations, then we'll go to the annotations layer and choose the annotations section of the ribbon. And rather than use the standard multi-leader type, we will actually create a new one. Let's just call it new. And we'll use the standard as a starting point, but let's fix some of these items. So straight is fine, color by block, well, you might want color by layer actually, and line weight possibly by layer, some of those by layer, that might be better. And let's choose the small dot, that's what I prefer anyway. The size of the arrowhead, let's make it a bit bigger, 10. And let's go to leader structure. Let's make the landing distance a little bit longer, just for the scale that we're doing. 20 should be fine. And for the content, this refers to the text, so mText is probably okay. And text color by layer again. Text height, let's make it 12 in this case. And let's have a little bit more of a gap. So let's choose 10 millimeters. That's the gap between the end of the line and the start of the text. So you'll see this is roughly what it's going to look like here. So let's click OK and make sure it's current. Close. And then what we'll do is we'll start off and label something then. So let's choose the perimeter insulation. What I would say is try to pick an angle that doesn't conflict with your detail. So in this case we don't want it to be at 45 degrees because that's going to get confused maybe with some of the hatching or make it harder to see. But at the same time don't make it 90 degrees because then that might get mixed up with the DPC or the DPM or something like that. So make it a fairly shallow angle that is not going to interfere with any of the other elements in your detail, but the angle that you choose might depend on different details as well. So let's type in 25 millimeter manufacturer. So a manufacturer's name could go in there, 25 manufacturer perimeter insulation. You might want to specify which type of insulation it is, for example, as well. So that can go in there. And then what I tend to do sometimes is copy that piece of text a number of times in a straight line so that I can then maybe annotate other elements as well. So in this case, what we can say is 18 by 50 millimeter softwood timber skirting board painted finish. And this particular one here, let's shorten that slightly so we can choose intersection just there at that point. We could label that as some information relating to the DPM, 1200 gauge, and there are different manufacturers again, so manufacturer polythene, for example, might be the material. DPM, and this one will just write 125 millimeter manufacturer floor insulation. And again, those different parts of the specification can be copied down for the facing brick and for the foundations and things like that throughout the detail to fill out the information as required. So at this stage I should have covered enough information to allow you to finish the detail in AutoCAD, adding in the extra information. What I would say is that it might be tight fitting this detail on an A4 page, depending how much text you want to put in as well. And the more text you put in, the better, because you're specifying what you're actually going to use in the building. So if you do end up with a lot of annotations and notes and things like that, it's good to add that in. Again, you might want to put in a note relating to the DPC. Whether the DPC is best there, or actually maybe at this level, is debatable, I suppose. But what you should do, I suppose, is if it's quite close to the ground, let's say it was in at that joint, you might want to put in a line here and add in an annotation that says the minimum distance here is 150 millimeters. But there is enough information covered in these videos to allow you to finish off the detail, and if it does end up too big for A4, you can always increase the paper size to A3, and that's going to be twice the size of an A4 page, so there'll be plenty of room anyway. And you will need to add on a title block and things like that. Thanks for watching. Please feel free to like and share the video, and have a look at some other videos on the channel. Thank you.